Hi
Blog
everyone.
Talk Radio.
Hi everyone. Welcome to Coffee Chat with Camille. Today I have on a special guest, and his name is Shane Rogers. He's a comedian, and he's also a co-host of the popular Midnight Facts for Insomniacs podcast. And I am thrilled to have him here today and he's going to let our audience know about how they can, how to build an audience for your podcast. So let me go ahead and start with us asking some questions. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, hi there.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yes. I do have some questions, and let me go ahead and start. I introduced you also. Okay. So, how did you develop and grow your podcast?
So our podcast is like a third try. So I had some experience in the past with podcasts that didn't work, and I think that was really important. At the time that I started this podcast, I had figured out what doesn't work, which I think is kind of the most important element, honestly, is learning from experience. So my first two podcasts were very, I would say, like nebulous. They just sort of were based on, like I think a lot of people's are, kind of based on something like the Joe Rogan model, where you're sort of just talking to friends about whatever interests you for long periods of time, right? And that just does not work unless you're a celebrity. There's, if you, obviously interview shows can work if they're interesting and they're targeted, but just, I'm going to talk to my buddies about things that interest us for a long period of time. No one's going to listen to that unless you have some type of huge social media following. You're an influencer, you're a celebrity. So those two really taught me a lot about what people are not looking to listen to.
Yes.
And so what I took from that was that I needed a real concept for the show. It needed to, what they call niching down, right? Find a niche. And for me, that was finding, a topic that, and also engaging the listenership. So not only did we sort of decide on making it a very specific type of show, but also letting the listeners have a say in that. And so that I think is the most important thing to begin with, was that we found a concept that worked. In this case, we do a deep dive every week on a specific topic that is chosen by the fans. And I research the topic, and then I sort of teach it to my friend, a longtime friend and a fellow comedian. And that's been really successful, kind of, getting the fans involved. And I think that, just to start off with, that's the most important element, is to make sure that you're not just, out there throwing your words out into the void and thinking that people are going to be interested just because you're interested in what you have to say. It really comes down to finding a successful concept and laser focusing on that and making sure that you're constantly delivering what they expect from you.
Excellent. So one would be find a niche or a concept, and then the other would be find a topic that your fans would be interested in listening to.
Yeah, and it can be really, the more specific, the better, right? In fact, that's one thing that I wish we were a little bit more specific than we are. If there's anything that we've had to overcome, it's the fact that we're a very broad subject. We've covered everything from the history of clowns was our last episode, to UFOs, to conspiracy theories, to QAnon. We've done a little bit of everything. And
I
so
saw that.
I think, yeah, and it's been great. I mean, it keeps it fun for us. That's been really important for us, because I think we'd get bored if we were too deeply niched down. But for most podcasts, what really works, what was really successful, is find something that you're interested in and then just delve into that. So if you're interested in Dungeons and Dragons or something, have your podcast be Dungeons and Dragons themed and do that every week, because there's a huge market for that is not getting reached by everyone, and certainly you can have a unique take on it. And I think it's really important to make sure that you're not just going in and saying, well, we have something for everyone, because that's never true. It never works. If you have something for everyone, then you're really not appealing to anyone. You want to have something specifically for a certain type of audience that is going to appreciate what you have, and make it as specific as possible. That's why, there are podcasts that are huge and all they do is talk about The Office, the show The Office, or all they do is talk about, knitting. I mean, there are literally podcasts about knitting. And every week, because there are tons of people who are into knitting and they don't have anywhere to go, you give them one show and they're going to flock to it. So it's really important to be specific.
Excellent. And then I was curious as to why you decided to be a podcaster. I decided to be a podcaster because I think at the time I assumed that was what you sort of just had to do. I'm a stand-up comedian. In my first couple years of doing comedy, it seemed like everyone was starting a podcast, and you sort of had to have like an Instagram and a podcast, and you had to have an email list. There were just things that you had to do in order to market, and I sort of felt like that was something that I was checking off the list. And so that's probably also why the first couple of podcasts that I had didn't succeed the way this one has, was that I was sort of just doing it, it was perfunctory. I just sort of assumed I had to do it, and I was going through the motions. This one I started because I became a real fan of podcasts, and there were a few podcasts that I was listening to that I enjoyed, but I wished they were different. There was a podcast called Stuff You Should Know, and there was another podcast called The Dollop, and they were both two guys sitting around talking about different topics. The Dollop really focuses on kind of historical, biographical stuff, and Stuff You Should Know is more like us in a way in which they sort of choose a different topic every week. But I wanted, Stuff You Should Know was fun, but it wasn't irreverent enough, and they were very G-rated. They didn't swear. It was kind of like almost for kids, it felt like. And then The Dollop was fun. They were two guys being very irreverent. There were two comedians, but I wasn't as interested in the topics, and they went on really long. They were like 2-hour podcasts, and I just couldn't hang with it. So I wanted something. I wanted to listen. I wanted there to be something out there that was a mixture of kind of those, and maybe a little bit shorter, a little bit fun, and a broader topic, sort of a broader section of topics that I could get into. And so I created what I wanted to listen to. I was like, this is missing for there's an audience out there that wants a little bit of both of these podcasts. And so that's what we created. I sat down with a good friend of mine who I've known since high school, and we have really good chemistry, and we created our show, Midnight Facts for Insomniacs. That was just for people who, we spend a lot of time, we're both night owls, we spend a lot of time kind of reading and studying things in the middle of the night. And so we figured there's a lot of other people that do that are up late and, looking for something to listen to, and they want to learn about a weird topic. They want to learn about UFOs this week. And so we're going to give that to them. And that's where it came from. That's wonderful. And then how did you attract an audience and create your community for your show? And more importantly, how long did it take you to do that? Yeah.
That's great question. It takes time. We are now in our we're in our third year. I guess we'll come up in December. It'll be 3 years. And it took, I would say the first year was just audience building. And it's really, the community is huge. Like that is, you're never going to, if you're starting out as an independent podcast and an indie show, you're never going to have a huge budget for marketing. You really have to do some guerrilla marketing tactics. And for us, what happened was that we weren't taking it seriously at first, and we didn't think that it was going to be anything. I mean, I think when we started, like I said, we built this show because it was something we would want to listen to, and we thought it was fun. And as it started to take off a little bit in the beginning, we were kind of blindsided by that, and we really didn't know how to leverage our fan base. And I think if you go into it knowing how to use your listenership to build the show for you, that's huge. And that took us a long time to figure out. I think had we gone into it knowing what we were doing, it would have built a lot faster. But once we started to get a little bit of a listenership, we were actually, our first few episodes were recorded in a car because we didn't have like a studio or anywhere to record. We literally would drive my Prius to like a quiet location out in the woods where we live and then just record in the car. So it was like super low budget, super bootstrapped. And so, you know, we were not taking it seriously. And all of a sudden I started seeing that the numbers were going up, and I'm looking at these downloads and I'm going, wow, you know, some people are actually listening to this. And then we started getting emails and we started getting suggestions for topics, and we realized, okay, there's something here. And now we have to start taking this more seriously because people are actually listening. And now it feels, suddenly there's a little bit of pressure. You know, in the beginning it was very loose and unscripted and just completely off the cuff. And we were like, all right, we have to deliver something that people are really going to be more interested in, because now otherwise we feel like they're wasting their time every week. And so the most important thing, I think, is to start leveraging that community. The community that you build around your show is the most valuable promotional tool that you'll have. You know, you're just one person podcasting, maybe 2 or 3 at most. But as soon as you have a fan base, like even a small one, you have a potential promotional team. So, you know, let's say you're only getting 100 downloads a week after your first few months, but you're getting that every week. Well, then that's like a little battalion, right? That's more than a Navy SEAL team. And they're coming back every week because they care about your show. You are part of their lives now. And I think one thing that people have to understand when they're podcasting, and I think this is important because a lot of us suffer from imposter syndrome, but if strangers are listening every week, that means that you are contributing value to their lives, right? They're getting enjoyment from your show. And it's okay to ask them to give something back. People are happy to do that. Like there's this principle in psychology called the reciprocity principle. And unless you are like a selfish sociopath, when you get something from someone, your instinct is to give something in return. So at least a few of your fans are not just going to be willing to help, they're going to actively want to help, and they'll feel good about giving something back. And so you just want to give them the opportunity to do that. So for instance, we have one member of our listenership created a Discord for us, and we didn't know what Discord was. And she created a Discord server. She messaged us and said, hey, I built this thing, and I've got a bunch of Insomniacs, is what we call our fans, and a bunch of the Insomniacs are in here now, and you guys should join. So we joined our own fan club, and we realized she was building this thing without us. And then I went and learned a bunch about Discord, and I kind of helped take it over, and now I sort of co-run it. And we have we have over 400 people in there on a regular basis. They're all in there chatting about the show. And, they became our little army to go out and promote. And we said, hey, we ran little contests for, we would send them a shirt if they got, a certain number of people to join, or if they put a bunch of stuff on their social media. And it just it sort of takes on a life of its own. And now we have a woman who runs our Instagram for us. We met her through the Discord. And so we've just leveraged our fan base to become the promotional team for the show, and that's been hugely successful for us.
Oh, it's wonderful. And then may I ask, that's outstanding. And then which topics have received the most listens so far of all the topics you all have done?
Oh, that's a good question. Boy, I should look back. I don't look at the individual stats for individual shows that often, but I do know some of the ones that were super successful. Scientology, we did an episode on anything like religion or cult-based always does really well. Okay. So we did episodes on Scientology and Mormonism, and both of those were really big. The QAnon episode, anything with cults, people seem to really gravitate to. Any of the darker subjects we find have really gone over well. And we did one on mummies recently, mummies and death rituals. That was really big. And then anything with animals, we did. People love stuff that we do with animals. Some of the ones that, haven't done as well, though, as far as downloads, have been some of our more popular episodes as far as getting a lot of feedback from them. We did an episode on taxes, just the way taxes work and the history of taxation and taxing in different countries. And it sounds really dry, but it ended up being one of our more fun episodes, I think, just because we were joking about it, and, we were making fun of the fact that it was going to be dry. And so we kind of, I looked into history for interesting taxes. There's, for instance, in Russia, they used to have a beard tax. So if you wanted to have a beard as a man, you would have to pay a tax to have a beard. And if you didn't pay the tax, they would forcibly shave you. So there were, things that were interesting that people probably wouldn't know about that were kind of off the beaten path. And so those episodes, even though they weren't as big, the episode like taxes got a ton of interesting feedback from those. So some of the most, rewarding episodes for us haven't always been the most popular episodes.
Yes, it makes me interested in just hearing about it. Is there? Oh, okay. So as a podcaster, what would you? How can I say this? How would you give our audience suggestions about how to select music, how to do music production, recording, editing our shows? Just some of the technical.
Yeah, sure. So the technical side of it, I think, is really undervalued by people who are starting out. I think that it's really easy to get into podcasting and think that you're just going to say things into a microphone and that's kind of all you have to do. There is, I think editing is really important. Both the music is I guess important. If you're going that route, if you want to have, there are some shows that don't have any musical intro. They just maybe have, one thing we do is we do have a little bit of a musical intro, but overlaid over that, we have a little snippet from each show. So there's always a little preview or, a little kind of clip in the beginning to catch people's attention. And I think it's important to keep your intro really reasonable and not overly long. I think everyone, especially if they get a piece of music that they really like and they get the rights to it, they're like, oh, I'm going to play this whole song in the beginning because it's so cool. And no one, think about your audience is going to be listening to that. If your show is successful or if you just stick with it, your audience is going to listen to that hundreds of times. And they're going to get bored of a 2-minute intro, right? They're going to be skipping it, and they might not even want to bother with it. So really important to keep that intro and any music that you use in the beginning very, very short and pithy. Editing out, learning to edit. I use you can use GarageBand, which is free on Mac. You can use Reaper, which is free on PC. Both of them are really pretty full-featured. I use Logic, which is kind of the upgraded version of GarageBand. But either of those will work. There's Audacity and things, but I really think you should get a decent full-featured editor and learn how to use it, because it's super important to take out, we have just sections of time where we're in the studio. We now have a studio, which we bought mostly, the studio we didn't buy, but a lot of the equipment we bought through Patreon money at this point. But, when we go in there's times where, some a siren goes by outside, or there's some kind of crazy noises outdoors, and we're going to have to edit those out, and you want that to be seamless. So learning how to edit, I think, is important. There's a ton of YouTube tutorials about how to use Logic and Reaper, and they can they can break it down and make it kind of simple for you. If you are looking for music and you're not a music producer yourself, I'm very lucky in that Duncan and I, the way that we met and know each other is that we were in bands together for many years. He's a great singer, and I play guitar. And so I've been doing music production since I was a teenager. So I do the vast majority of music I've just been able to do for my own podcast. But one place that I would recommend for totally royalty-free stuff is Pixabay, Pixabay. And I believe they have a music section, and then they have also images. So if you want, individual artwork, go there, you can get it, and you don't have to worry about licensing. You can even use it for commercial purposes. So that's my favorite site. I use it for, I like to have different artwork for each episode. And so I go through Pixabay, and then I use Canva if I want to alter it at all or create like a cover art. Also, if you're looking for cover art and you want someone else to do it and you're not much of an artist, just go to Fiverr. You can pay a few bucks, and it sources from all around the world, and people who are great artists will bid on your project. And I think we've had some art done for like, $20 here or there, and you just get a little tip. Sometimes it's called Fiverr because a lot of stuff is even $5, but I would want to pay a little more than that. But so there are a lot of opportunities for free stuff that you can use. But I think it's really important to learn how to edit and manipulate that stuff yourself, just so you can get in there and make a high quality show.
Okay, thank you. And then what type of equipment is best for a podcast?
So it depends a little bit on what your situation is. If you are going to be solo, if you're going to be in a room by yourself and you have a pretty well insulated area that's not going to pick up a lot of outside noise, then your best bet would be a condenser mic. And condenser mics are the highest quality mics. They are very, very sensitive. They'll pick up everything, which means that if you have a cat or a dog or a kid or there's outside noise, they're going to pick that up too. And that's why I say you want to have an insulated environment. But if you're in a really good insulated environment and you're by yourself, definitely get a condenser mic. And the most popular ones are things like the Blue Yeti. I'm not a huge fan of the Blue Yeti. I do have one because it was the first mic I bought because that's what everyone said to buy. But I would look, there are some really good options out there. The Blue Yeti is a quality mic. It's totally fine if that's what you're doing. I think the biggest problem with a condenser mic, and specifically the Blue Yeti, is that people do buy it when they're going to be in the wrong situation. So if you're like us, me and Duncan, we sit in the same room when we record. And so the last thing you want in that scenario is a condenser mic, because it's going to pick up every motion, every little rustling sound, every noise that the other person makes while you're on the mic. So if you're in a non-ideal situation where it's not just one person in a room, then you want a dynamic microphone, which blocks out a lot of the sound around you. And there are a bunch of good options for dynamic mics. You can get them through, anywhere can tell you the best sort of budget options. You can get really good dynamic mics for literally like $50 to $70. Even the SM57 or SM58, which are really popular mics by Shure. They're great for music as well. So they're a good all-around mic to have. The SM58 is what we started with, and then from there you can upgrade. We now have very expensive mics. They're called EV-RE20s, and they're like, $500 mics. I mean, they're overkill, and I would honestly say that they're not even worth the money. Like, I love them. I'm glad we have them, but they're not $500 better than the mics that we had before. So you don't have to get the very expensive mics like an SM7B, the ones that Rogan uses or something. Like, ours are in that category, and you just don't need to go there, especially if you're starting out and you know whether you're going to really love podcasting. I would say stick with something dynamic or condenser mic within the $100 range, $75 to $100. You can find a lot of decent mics there. And then just a basic laptop and the recording software. It's generally all you're going to need. If you do have a dynamic mic, if you have multiple mics that you're going to be plugging into a computer, you will need some type of audio interface. And I think the most popular one is the Scarlett. And you can, Google those. You'll see they're usually around $100. And you plug into those. They switch from an audio or an analog to a digital signal to get the signal into your computer.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much again. And then let's see. How are the when you do topics about politics, because we're kind of like, I think they call it, we're in culture wars and all this good stuff right now, politically speaking. How do you approach those topics on your podcast, if at all?
Yeah, that's another good question. That is really hard right now. If you go to any popular podcast and you look at their reviews, especially in Apple Podcasts where they can leave a written review, you'll generally see that there are a ton of, a bunch of good reviews, and then there will be one or two saying like, why did they bother? Don't bring politics into this. Why are you letting your politics show through? We only have one right now. We're at a 5-star rating in Apple, which is very nice. But we had one negative review. The only negative review written that we've ever gotten so far, knock on wood, was someone who said, I enjoyed this podcast until they brought politics into it. And we couldn't even remember when we had brought politics into it. We are not a political show. But I think there had been one episode where we did something about, we did an episode on pointless petty wars that had happened in the past. And a lot of them were very silly. There was a war that was fought over a camel. Like, there have just been a lot of wars that were ridiculous in history. But I think we mentioned something about, the Iraq War. Or we mentioned something that was very non-triggering as far as I could tell. But it rubbed someone the wrong way. They thought that we were making a political statement. And so, I don't know that you can fully keep your politics out of whatever show you're doing, even if it's not a political show. I think that we're in such a polarized time and such a sensitive time that whatever you say is going to be interpreted through a million lenses, that people are looking for your bias or whatever. I think the best thing that you can do is, if you have a politics podcast, it's irrelevant. Your political views are going to be out there, and there's nothing you can do about that, and you're just going to get a little bit of a negative. You're going to get a backlash on, some people aren't going to like it. If you're doing a non-politics podcast, I would say just you're going to have to try your best to sort of be even-handed, but don't worry when a few people get offended, because there's honestly nothing you can do. Everyone right now is looking for something. They are very sensitive. They're very triggered by what's going on in the world. And understandably, there's a lot to be triggered by out there. There's a lot that you should be concerned about. But there's nothing you can do to, completely sanitize your show and make it appeal to everyone and never offend someone. I don't think there's any way to do that in this current climate. So, you just do your best and try not to let it affect you. That's the main thing. It's just, that was really sad for us. We didn't want to lose a listener just because they thought we were being political, even though we felt like we weren't. But at the same time, that listener probably wasn't for us. It's probably someone we wouldn't agree with on a lot of things, and not every show is for everyone. So I would say, if you're not a politics podcast, sure, do your best to keep political views out of it, but at the same time, understand that it's going to come through in some way. Someone's going to get upset, and it's okay. Life goes on. Just don't worry about it.
Yes. And then that's great advice. And then also, how do you, this is again, because we have just a few minutes left. I only have just 2 questions left, okay? How do you approach your pop culture topics, movies, and television?
Well, you mean as far as like how do we present them, or?
Yes. How do you present them, and who do you choose? Like what type of topics in pop culture or movies or TV do you select? Is there like a specific genre in pop culture or person? I mean, does that make sense? I'm asking.
Yeah, so we're really lucky in that our topics now, no, that's fine. Our topics are actually chosen by the listeners at this point. So we have a Discord room where it's a topic suggestion, and they go in there and they suggest topics, and then we choose the most popular ones, and then they vote on them. So we have done some, pop culture related stuff, but it's all been chosen for us, which is nice. We now do a whole other set of shows for only our patrons, and those involve a lot of pop culture. I'm a huge movie fan. I'm a cinephile. So we do every other week, we typically do something that has to do with movies or pop culture. We do like a top 5 list. Next week, we're doing the top 5 Hollywood cliches, and we bring on a guest and we talk about those. And that's all just kind of fun. That's just, I get to choose whatever I want to talk about in pop culture. So, with our regular show, the topics are chosen for us, which is nice. And then with the other shows, it's just kind of a grab bag, and I get to choose what I find interesting.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, actually, it looks like my seconds are counting down right now. So quickly, what is your favorite coffee that you like to drink or favorite hot beverage?
Oh, that's funny. I don't do coffee.
Okay.
I could handle, I guess, maybe a decaf. I spent many years drinking
Decaf.
way too much coffee, and I'm a little bit too high strung for it. So I don't do coffee
Okay.
anymore, but I do I'm like a grandma. I drink chamomile tea, and I'm good. It puts me to sleep at night, and keeps me even keeled.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much, Shane, for all of your information. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for coming on and being our guest today. Okay. And I'm going to
Yeah,
say bye for
absolutely.
now. Thank you. Thank you.
All right,
Bye-bye.
appreciate it. You bet.
Yeah, I'm sure.